welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a Silicon Valley legend, Ben Horowitz's The Hard Thing About Hard Things. But, this isn't going to be your standard book review. We're going to look at it through the critical eyes of a business school professor to figure out what parts of this brutally honest, wartime manual actually hold up under academic pressure. Let's get into it.
So just think about it for a second. Most of what you learn about business, it prepares you for peacetime, right? When things are stable. But what happens when the whole floor just falls out from under you? That's where this book lives. It's not a neat little recipe for success. No, it's a gritty, in-the-trenches survival guide for when all the recipes have failed.
It's pretty easy to look like a brilliant leader when everything's going up and to the right. But the real test comes when the company is facing an existential threat. That's the moment we're talking about today.
Yeah, forget about just optimizing things. Horowitz is talking about a total psychological and operational framework for when the stakes are literally life or death for your company. It's not about winning, it's about surviving. And rule number one of survival is you have to confront reality head on.
And this question, right here, this is the absolute core of our professor's analysis. So keep this in your mind as we go forward. Are you dealing with the cold, hard facts of your situation, or are you just telling yourself a story that makes you feel better? Because the answer to that question is everything.
Okay, so what does this wartime CEO actually look like? What are we talking about here? Let's break down the three big concepts that really make this framework tick.
First up is what Horowitz calls the struggle. And if you've ever led anything, you know this feeling. It's that pit in your stomach when you realize the gap between the promises you made and what's actually happening is huge. But here's the big insight. The struggle isn't a sign you failed. It's a fundamental part of leadership. The trick is to not take it personally and focus on the one move that can save the company, not your own ego.
And this table really just lays it all out, doesn't it? The shift you have to make is kind of jarring. All the things that make you a fantastic peacetime leader, empowering your team, seeking consensus, those things can actually kill your company in wartime. You have to flip the script. You have to be paranoid. You have to be directive. You might even have to micromanage. Because when the building is on fire, you don't form a committee to discuss the best exit strategy, right? You just yell, "Everyone follow me, now."
And finally, hiring. Standard advice is to hire well-rounded people, right? Avoid big weaknesses? Well, Horowitz says, forget that. During a crisis, you don't need someone who's pretty good at a lot of things. You need someone who is world-class at the one thing that will solve your burning problem, even if they have other flaws. You're hiring for a specific, massive strength.
So, okay, it's a powerful and intense read, for sure. But from an academic perspective, how well does this framework actually hold up to scrutiny? Let's put on our professor's hat and really analyze this.
The biggest strength of this book, academically speaking, is that it's a much-needed dose of reality. It's a counterweight to all the happy-go-lucky, we're changing the world narratives. It gets into the messy, transactional, and sometimes painful leadership that's required when you're under extreme pressure.
But, of course, it's not without its weaknesses. First, there's a huge survivorship bias. This advice is coming from one guy who made it through a very specific time in Silicon Valley. Second, this whole wartime mode, it's just not sustainable. You can't run on pure adrenaline forever. It leads to burnout and a toxic culture. Then you have to ask, does this advice even apply outside of tech? Maybe not so much in a regulated industry like healthcare. And finally, it kind of promotes this idea of the hero CEO who saves the day, when a lot of modern theory suggests that real resilience comes from the team, the network, not just one person at the top.
Okay, to make this all really concrete, let's look at a tale of two companies that perfectly illustrates this difference between managing reality and just protecting a story. Let's talk Netflix versus Quibi.
So on one hand, you have Netflix during their infamous Quickster crisis, a total PR disaster. On the other hand, you have Quibi, which launched right as a global pandemic made its entire use case obsolete. One of them faced the brutal reality and pivoted. The other blamed the world and clung to their original story.
Think about this. Netflix lost 800,000 subscribers. Their stock price was cratering. This was Reed Hastings' wartime. He took a massive public beating, he apologized for the terrible communication, but he doubled down on the strategy. He managed the reality of the situation, that streaming was the future, and he focused the entire company on that one single thing.
And then there's Quibi. They had nearly $2 billion and all the big names behind them. But all that capital couldn't buy them the wartime agility they desperately needed.
Instead of managing the reality that their product wasn't working in the new world, they just kept managing the story they'd sold to their investors, and well, we all know how that ended. It's the perfect example of how money can't save you if you're ignoring the truth.
Okay, so what does this all mean for you? How can you actually apply these lessons? Here's a practical 3-step checklist that comes straight out of Horowitz's insights.
Right, these aren't just abstract ideas. These are things you can do tomorrow. First, run a wartime audit. Figure out the one single metric that matters for survival right now and ignore all the vanity metrics. Second, build your psychological shield. Find 2 or 3 people you can be brutally honest with, whose opinions you truly trust. They are your brain trust when you're in the struggle. And third, and this is so important, create a bad news first culture. Actively praise and reward the people who bring you the painful truth. Make them heroes, not messengers to be shot.
And ultimately, I think this is the book's enduring lesson. Leadership isn't just about optimizing a system, it's an art of endurance. The book gives you permission to be brave, even if you're imperfect. It reminds you that feeling overwhelmed and in over your head doesn't mean you're failing. It just means you're doing the hard work of leading.
So we end right back where we started, with that one crucial question. I want you to really think about it in your own work, in your team, in your company. Are you managing the actual, messy, uncomfortable reality of your challenges? Or are you spending all your energy trying to protect the story of how things are supposed to be? Your answer might be more important than you think.